Hi everybody, my name is Jared May. This is my live bio. Just some basic information to start out. I'm an EFL teacher in Hanoi, Vietnam. I've been doing this for about a year. I teach in high schools. Prior to that, I was teaching in Korea at elementary schools. My hometown is Bowen Island, British Columbia. You can see a picture here. It's quite a beautiful place and a small community. Academic background. After graduating, I went to Langara. At this stage in my life, I was kind of experimenting with academia, but was more interested in playing music, so I was doing that around Vancouver quite a bit. After experimenting with music, I figured I wanted to get back into academia, so I moved across the country to Quebec, to Montreal, and did an honors English literature degree. After that, I thought about actually taking a master's degree in English literature, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to try teaching to see if I like it beforehand. So I moved to Korea and did the EPIC program there, and it was excellent. They offered great teacher training as well. Outside of work, here are some terms that I think define me quite well. So friends and music always very important to me. I'm never at my happiest unless I'm playing music. Here is a band that I was playing with in Korea. Again, a really important thing for my own well-being is learning things at all times. I started scuba diving when I was in British Columbia. I got into first aid when I was scuba diving in Thailand, and then I became a patio rescue diver in South Korea. So I think we're doing underwater pumpkin carving here. Travel is a really central part of my life. Some friends and I did a motorcycle trip across Vietnam last spring. Went from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh. It was tons of fun. Outside of teaching, I'm also a part-time fitness instructor, and I do competitive races with a team at the gym. Traditions are really important to me. Whenever I go back home, I like to spend most of my time with family. This is my mom's side of the family, and I also have family in Australia who I've been fortunate enough to go and visit. Being from Vancouver, I'm also a Canucks fan. I know a lot of you might scoff at that. They're not doing so well right now, and I don't have a lot of opportunities to watch them in Asia, but when I go back home, it's definitely something that I really like doing with my family. And again, something that is central to my well-being, I think, is volunteering. I volunteered at a women's shelter in Busan, Korea, and here's a picture of me and a student on Halloween, I believe. How do I use digital tech in the classroom? The first thing is I always use it purposely. So purposely, I always like to structure an app around a pedagogical goal as opposed to the other direction. Also, I really like the idea of the flipped classroom. So giving kids not homework but questions to ask and answer outside of class, and maybe bring new knowledge into class using apps like Duolingo or using websites like the Khan Academy. Also, I'm a strong believer in games. I like to structure my lessons through conversational language, so CLT, conversational language teaching, as opposed to broadcasting information. And I think that games are a really excellent way to framework that kind of lesson. How do I use apps outside of work? How do I use technology in general? As I travel a lot, Google Translate and Google Maps are always really important. They've gotten me out of a few really difficult situations. Je parle français aussi. I lived in Montreal for a little while, so I speak French, and I'm also trying to learn Italian. I've learned a little bit of Korean and Vietnamese as well. Theoretical frameworks that I subscribe to. So cognitive load theory, the idea that we can be more compelling teachers, that we can teach more effectively if we understand how memory works. Okay, so if we can scaffold a class correctly, then we can maximize the amount of information transfer. Ertmer and Newby's idea of metacognition. We learned about this in the Principles of Learning class, which is, by the way, the only other class that I've taken besides this one so far. So they talk about learning as a skill. So we can be expert learners if we ask ourselves, what are we good at? What are we bad at? What are our strengths and weaknesses with learning? And how can we work on those? How can we reflexively work on those? Carol Dweck also, I think, picks up on this concept really eloquently with her idea of not yet learning. James Marcia was a scholar at SFU, and his work focused on expanding Erikson's stages of development. So in adolescent development, he thinks that exploration is good, which I completely agree with. So we shouldn't foreclose options based on the prescriptions of our school or our family. We shouldn't basically just do things because people tell us to. We should explore and see if we really want to do that. If we foreclose those options, or if we do something because it's easier or because it is socially accepted, then we might not be able to attain the same degree of mental health as we would if we draw our own conclusions of life, if we explore. Research interests at UOIT in general. So again, one of the things that I discovered in the Principles of Learning class is games are great, and gamifying activities is a really great way to leverage information in class, to make classes more fun, to maximize the amount of conversation in class. So as a second language teacher, these are all core principles for me. Also, as I mentioned, being a high school teacher, adolescent development and identity concerns are also central to my focus academically. Understanding behavior as a process towards defining identity as opposed to behavior in a vacuum. And again, since I'm an EFL teacher, the connections between second language teaching and leadership models, academic conversations, communicative conversations, social conversations, etc., and development are really interesting to me. So interest in this class, and this is subject to change, of course. Can we describe cell phone use in terms of addiction? Can we use the vocabulary of addiction, or is that more of an anecdotal thing? Also, what is healthy use? Maybe we can extend our cognition through phones. Some people think we can even extend our phenotype through phones, which I find really interesting. And since I live in Asia, I think cultural and status factors should always be taken into account in this conversation of mental health and technology use. So I'm out of time. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you in class. Bye-bye.